The subject line hit me like a slap. Confirmation of closing, Unit 304, Seabreeze Condominiums. I was sitting at my wobbly kitchen table, laptop open, coffee going cold beside me. The only sound was the dull hum of my fridge and the faint ticking of the cheap wall clock. The notification popped up in the corner of my screen like any other boring email, but my eyes snagged on the condo address and the world tilted. Grandpa's condo, the one with the peeling blue balcony rail and the coffee stains in the kitchen grout. The one I'd been told was too complicated for you to handle, said with tight smiles and air quotes. My fingers felt numb as I clicked the email. A PDF loaded, settlement statement. Rows of numbers, line items, a six-figure sale price that made my throat tighten. Under seller, two names, my mother and my father. Under buyer, a couple I'd never heard of. Under previous owner of record. Nothing about me. The cursor blinked over the word download, like it was waiting for my permission to make all this real. I could actually feel the ache bloom in my chest when I saw the unit number 304. Grandpa's unit. The visible threat was right there in front of me. On paper, the condo was gone, sold, closed, finished. Money already paid out. No room for feelings in those columns. But underneath the numbers, a voice echoed in my head. Grandpa's voice, gravelly and a little breathless from his heart meds. The condo will be yours one day, kiddo. I signed the papers already. They can't touch it. I'd believed him because he'd never lied to me. My parents had done enough lying for everyone. Cold settled into my stomach as another, older pattern snapped into focus. My parents had erased my choices my whole life. Investment accounts redirected. Helpful. Signatures done. On your behalf. Opportunities vetoed with a phone call. Why would Grandpa's last gift be any different? Outwardly, I was still. Inwardly, I was vibrating. I hit call on my mother's contact before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring in her charity event voice, the one she used when donors were listening. Polished, airy, just loud enough. Hi, sweetheart. I'm just heading into a meeting. Can this wait? Did you sell Grandpa's condo? My voice sounded flatter than I felt. There was a beat of silence, like she had to switch scripts. Oh. Yes, we finalized everything last week. It was too much for you to manage. These things are complicated, darling. We handled it. We'll make sure you're looked after. My father's voice cut in. Speakerphone. Of course. You have no idea what property taxes are like on coastal units, he said. HOA fees, liability, storm damage. You don't understand any of that. You should be thanking us for simplifying things. I stared at the seller names on the PDF, heat rising along my neck. Grandpa told me he deeded it to me before he died. I said slowly. Was my name ever on anything? The temperature in my mother's tone dropped 10 degrees. You're imagining things. Everything was always in our names. Don't get dramatic. It's done now. And frankly, this is not an appropriate time to. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked back at the email. Under the boilerplate text about closing, there was an attachment I hadn't opened yet. Title search summary, chain of title. A line in the body of the email caught my eye. Prior transfer from hem grandfather's name to my full legal name instrument .1264,789s. Previously recorded. My heartbeat kicked harder. Previous transfer to me. I clicked the title search. There it was in black and white, a quitclaim deed from my grandfather to me, recorded 8 months before he died. My full name spelled correctly, a specific instrument number from the county recorder's office. He hadn't just been talking. He'd actually done it. And then, below it, another document. Corrective transfer, my name to 100 parents' names, recorded 6 months later. My name listed as grantor, theirs as grantees. Next to it, a signing date that made my stomach drop. I knew exactly where I'd been that week. I'd been in another country, halfway across the world, posting photos from Tokyo at 2 in the morning local time, exhausted and happy. I remembered the time zone conversions, the jet lag, the smell of ramen on cold streets. I had not been in a notary's office signing away. A condo I'd barely had time to process was mine. The corrective deed was supposed to have my signature on it. On this summary, it was the link that made my parents legitimate, Sellers. I had never even seen it. My mother was still talking when I lifted the phone again, something about gratitude and adult decisions. I hung up without answering. They forged me. I whispered to the empty kitchen. On the screen, the PDF showed the corrective deed as the foundation for everything that came after their trust, their sale, their profit. It was the single piece of paper that turned Grandpa's promise into their asset. The fridge hummed on. The cursor kept blinking, and one question started pounding in my head louder than my pulse. How had my own parents pushed a forged deed past the county recorder, the title company, and a buyer without anyone stopping them? And could I prove it before that forged paper became untouchable truth? My parents have always loved to say we're comfortable, which is their polite way of avoiding the word rich. Not billionaire rich, not private jet rich, but old money adjacent. Country club memberships, multiple houses, a family lawyer on retainer, the kind of people who know their bankers' kids' names. In their world, image isn't just important, it's currency. Charity galas, foundation boards, tasteful Instagram posts about giving back. Everything is curated, controlled, edited. Then there's me. I went to a state school instead of their alma mater, majored in something impractical. Took a creative job that pays more in satisfaction than in status. I rent a small apartment in a building with creaky stairs and mismatched mailboxes. I don't work in the family business. I don't go to the club. In their eyes, I'm the disappointing child. A mildly embarrassing pet project they never quite managed to house a train. You don't think practically. My mother likes to say, you don't understand money. Leave the serious stuff to us. It's half scold, half mantra, repeated so often it almost sounds like fact. When I turned 18, their serious stuff started in earnest. They insisted on opening a custodial investment account for my future, except the account ended up only in my father's name for tax reasons. They showed me glossy brochures, graphs about compound interest, told me not to worry about the details. Years later, when I asked about it, my father shrugged. They'd cashed it out to help with your brother's MBA program, he said, as if that were self-evidently noble. You wouldn't have used it wisely anyway. Another time, they offered to put my car insurance under their umbrella policy to save you money. It sounded generous until I realized they'd enabled location tracking through the insurer's app and were monitoring my weekend trips. If I drove out of town, my mother would call the next day. We saw you went to the coast. Don't you think you should be saving gas money? Control disguised as care. Always. My grandfather was the only one who treated me like an adult. He was my dad's father, a retired electrician who'd bought a small beach condo decades ago, back when that stretch of coast was just cheap sand and wind, not prime real estate. His condo was nothing like my parents' houses. The furniture was mismatched, the art was sun-faded, and the sliding door to the balcony stuck every time the weather changed. He loved it. We'd sit on that tiny balcony with chipped railings, drinking cheap coffee out of chipped mugs, watching the waves slap the shore. He'd lean back in his plastic chair and say, "You're the only one who visits just to see me, not the view." He meant it. When his health started to fail, heart problems, breathing issues, I was the one who drove him to appointments, who sat with him in waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant. My parents came for holidays, dressed in resort casual, posing in front of the ocean for photos. One afternoon, about a year before he died, we were sitting in his postage-stamped living room, a medical show murmuring on low in the background. He turned off the TV and cleared his throat, eyes on the window. "I went down to that legal clinic downtown," he said. "Talked to a young lawyer. I deeded the condo to you." He paused, watching my face. "It's recorded, so no one can take it. It'll give you a start." Panic and gratitude tangled in my chest. "Grandpa, my parents are going to." He squeezed my hand surprisingly strong. "It's my property. It's my choice. They've had plenty. You need something that's just yours." There was a stubborn set to his jaw I'd seen when he argued with my grandmother about politics. I believed him because he'd never broken a promise to me. After he passed, The condo became a sore subject wrapped in polite language. My mother complained about the mess of clearing out his things. You have no idea how exhausting it is dealing with these estates. When I offered to help, she snapped. We've already taken care of it. Then softer, honestly. That place was more trouble than it was worth. My father joked at dinner. You should thank us for handling the condo situation. You don't want to deal with storm insurance and special assessments. Trust me. At the time, I pushed the unease down. They never mentioned any deed to me, and I had no paperwork. It was easier to believe Grandpa had meant well, but not followed through. Staring at the title email on my laptop now, that story dissolved. Grandpa's deed to me had been real. I could see it in the title search, my full legal name, an instrument number, a recording date 8 months before he died. He'd gone to the clinic, filed the paperwork, made it official. At some point after that, a corrective deed had popped into existence, flipping the condo back into my parents' hands as if his decision, and I, didn't matter. Shock hardened into something heavier, hotter. This wasn't family managing things, or state cleanup. This was paper trail theft. I opened a new tab and went to the county recorder's public search portal, the one Grandpa had mentioned once when he was grumbling about property tax increases. I typed in the parcel number from the title report, hands steady for the first time since I'd opened the email. The system spat out a list of recorded documents tied to that condo. There they were, in order: Grandpa's original deed when he first bought the unit. Grant deed individual to individual. My grandfather to me. Corrective deed individual to individuals. Me, supposedly, to my parents. Grant deed individuals to trust. My parents transferring the condo into their family trust. Nice and insulated. Finally, the grant deed from their trust to the third-party buyers. I clicked on the corrective deed. The scan loaded, slightly skewed, the county stamp dark in the corner. My name appeared as grantor in block letters, my parents' names as grantees. Below, a signature that looked very much like mine, right down to the looping R in my first name. A notary acknowledgement, embossed seal, commission number. A neat little package that said I'd freely given the condo back. The date was impossible. According to the header, I had peered before. The notary on a Tuesday I remembered vividly, because I'd spent that Tuesday getting lost in Tokyo, sending my parents photos of neon signs and vending machines they never answered. My passport stamp, my boarding passes, my old Instagram posts, they all said the same thing. I had not been in a suburban law office signing away real estate. For a second, the urge to scream nearly overwhelmed me. To call my parents and demand answers, to accuse them, to listen to them twist it into my fault. Instead, I sat completely still and let my breathing come back down. Then I started working. I downloaded every document the portal would give me: PDFs of each deed, the tax roll entries, the trust transfer. I saved them with clear names and let my laptop tag each file with the exact time of download. I printed hard copies on my cheap inkjet printer, the pages curling as they came out. I circled dates, notary names, instrument numbers in red pen like a crime scene. On my phone, I scrolled back to the week of that corrective deed signing date. Photos from Japan, boarding pass screenshots, my passport stamp photo I'd sent a friend as a joke. Evidence that I'd been thousands of miles away while I was supposedly smiling at a notary and handing away a condo. I'd grown up being told I didn't understand money, that I was too dreamy, too trusting, too soft for serious things. Sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by paperwork, I realized I didn't need to be a financial genius to read dates, signatures, and stamps. Fine. Maybe I didn't understand hedge funds or tax shelters, but I could understand this. I could understand that someone had used my name and a pen to rewrite my grandfather's last decision. And this time, I was going to use their own paperwork to indict them. I went back to the original email from the title company, reading every line slowly. At the bottom, in smaller font, a sentence I'd skimmed before jumped out at me. If you have any questions or disputes regarding the chain of title, please contact our claims department within 30 days of this notice. 30 days. An institutional window. After that, the sale, and whatever lies had fed into it, would solidify in the system as a closed book. A good faith transaction no one wanted to touch. I slid the printed documents into a plain folder, grabbed my keys, and stood up. If I wanted anyone to see this as more than family drama, I needed someone on the inside of the system to look at the same trail I just followed and feel that same cold, sharp wrongness. So I headed for the title company's claims office, determined to put this fraud in front of someone whose job was to care what the records actually said. The Titleco Regional Claims Department looked exactly like the kind of place that believed in neutral colors and plausible deniability. The building was all glass and brushed metal, squatting in an office park off the highway. Their name was etched in stainless steel beside revolving doors that whooshed every time someone went in or out. Inside, the air smelled faintly of copier toner and whatever air freshener passes for professional. A receptionist with perfect hair sat behind a long desk, a discreet logo glowing on the wall behind her. I emailed about a chain of title issue, I said, clutching my folder. For the Seabreeze condo. They told me to come to claims. She smiled like she'd rehearsed it. Name. She typed as I spoke, then handed me a clipboard with a generic intake form: name, contact, file number if known, nature of concern. I wrote in block letters, possible forged deed, prior owner rights. Because if I'd learned anything, it was that euphemisms protected the wrong people. She buzzed someone, murmured, claims conference too, and pointed me toward a glass-walled room down the hall. A man in his 40s with a slightly loosened tie and tired eyes appeared in the doorway. Ems. Harper, he asked. Yes. I'm Daniel Lewis, claims examiner. His handshake was polite, distant. Come on in. Let's see what we're looking at. The conference room was small, anonymous. Laminate table, 4 chairs, framed abstract print on the wall that meant nothing. He opened a slim laptop, logged into whatever system they used, and recited, So, you're contesting some aspect of the recent sale. I set my folder on the table and opened it deliberately. I'm contesting the part where the property got taken out of my name with a deed I never signed. His eyebrows twitched, but his tone stayed bland. Okay, let's take this step by step. I laid everything out between us, a copy of Grandpa's deed to me, with the instrument number, the recorded corrective. Deed from me back to my parents, printouts from the county recorder site showing the chain of title, and my passport stamps and boarding passes proving I'd been in Japan on the date of that corrective signing. He clicked around on his laptop, typing the condo's parcel number into their system. All right, he murmured. Here's the file. Lines of data reflected in his glasses. We ran a chain of title back 30 years before issuing the policy. We verified the seller as the current owner of record based on the recordings in the county index. We rely on what's of record and assume notarizations are valid unless someone flags a problem. On his screen, the same list I'd seen appeared. He scrolled, then stopped. This is the instrument that put your parents back into the chain of title. He rotated the laptop so I could see the corrective deed highlighted. That's the one I never signed, I said. He leaned closer, studying the notary block. Same notary that handled the transfer into your parents' trust. He muttered. Same notary on a couple of their other files, too. He glanced down to the notary's address. And this office is in the same building as, law offices of Cartwright and Hale. That's your family's counsel? Yes, I said. Their firm name is on the recording submission on the county site. He sat back, exhaled. I'll be honest, at the time, there was nothing about this that pinged as questionable. Grantor and grantees all share a last name. Internal estate planning, cleaning up a title issue. That's how it read to us. I slid my passport copy across to him, open to the stamped page. I was 5,000 miles away the week I supposedly walked into that notary's office. He compared the stamp dates to the deed's execution date on his screen. Something shifted in his expression, still reserved, but the boredom was gone. Okay, he said slowly. That timing's problematic. For a moment, he just tapped his pen against the table. Then he cleared his throat. Here's the bigger issue. The condo has already been sold to what we consider a good faith purchaser. They had no knowledge of any of this. Our title insurance policy protects the buyer and their lender. If there's a prior forgery in the chain, the insurer might owe money. But we don't usually unwind a closed sale. So the condo is just gone, I said, tasting the words. He didn't rush to soften it. The property itself may be gone as a remedy. But if we determine the chain was defective because of a forged deed, you could have a claim for damages. Essentially, we'd be confirming that an interest you should have had was wiped out by fraud. It hit like a second loss. First the condo, now the hope of getting it back. But beneath the grief was a harder, colder thought. If I could prove this, there would be a record somewhere, official and undeniable, that my parents had taken what wasn't theirs. Lewis closed the laptop halfway. I want to bring someone from risk and legal into this, he said. Is that all right? I nodded. A few minutes later, a woman in a navy blazer stepped in, carrying a legal pad. I'm Mei Chen, she said, risk and legal counsel. Her handshake was firmer than his. Daniel says you believe a deed in your chain was forged. Walk me through it. I repeated the story, this time more concise. Grandpa's recorded grant deed to me, the later corrective deed transferring it back without my knowledge, my travel proving I couldn't have signed. She took notes, then asked for the instrument numbers and the notary's commission number. If there's evidence of forgery, she said, we have obligations. We have to notify our underwriter. Depending on what we find, we may have to file a suspicious activity report. We may also look at a claim against the notary's errors and omissions insurance. She tapped her pen against the corrective deed copy. But we'll need more than your word. We need corroborating records. From who? I asked. The county recorder, for one, she said. You'll want to file an affidavit of non-execution there, formally swearing you did not sign this deed. Our legal department will request certified copies of all recorded instruments. And crucially, we'll need the notary's journal entry for that date. Every notarization has to be logged. Who appeared, what ID they used, their signature and thumbprint in many states. If the journal shows your name and some stranger's thumbprint, that's powerful. If it doesn't line up with your travel, even better. She pulled a standard form from a drawer and slid it toward me. For our purposes, I'd like you to complete a statement of fact. Just the basics, that you were deeded the property by your grandfather, that you never signed the corrective deed, that you were out of the country at the time it purports to be executed. This goes into our claim file. The form was simple name, contact, policy number, blank lines under. Describe the facts leading to your claim. I wrote carefully, sticking to dates and document titles, exactly as I'd seen them on the county site. At the bottom, a line read, I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct. I signed it with the same looping R someone else had tried to copy. As I handed it back, Miss Chen added, you also need to treat this as what it is, potential identity theft and forgery. File a police report. It doesn't have to be a full detective novel, just enough to get an incident number on record. And at the recorder's office, insist on filing that affidavit of non-execution. Their fraud unit can then flag the deed internally. Lewis nodded. Our policy clock runs from the date of discovery, he said. That's today, as far as our file is concerned. The sooner you get official reports into the system, the stronger your position will be. If you wait too long, everyone, from us to the courts, will argue you slept on your rights. Time had felt abstract until that moment. Now it felt like a fuse. Miss Chen photocopied my documents, then printed a sheet with a claim number at the top. This is your reference for our file, she said. We'll open an investigation. You may not get the condo back, but if we confirm forgery, there will be consequences for the notary and potentially for the parties who benefited. An hour after I walked in, I walked back out into the gray parking lot with the claim number in my hand and a copy of my statement of fact in my folder. My phone buzzed as I reached my card, an email from Miss Chen, copying me on a message to someone with underwriting counsel. in their title. Subject line: potential forgery of corrective deed, prior owner's rights, Seabreeze Unit 304. Seeing it written that way, potential forgery, on company letterhead made something in my chest loosen. For the first time, this wasn't just my word against my parents' rehearsed outrage. But if the title company's team did confirm the forgery, it wouldn't stop there. It could trigger investigations into my parents and the notary, maybe even their lawyer. And none of that would happen cleanly unless the county recorder and the police were looking at the same pattern of ink. I slid into the driver's seat, set the folder on the passenger side, and started the engine. I didn't go home. I turned toward downtown instead. If the paper trail was their weapon, the county recorder's office was where it lived. And it was time to put my version of the truth into that system before the clock they'd just warned me about ran out. The county recorder's office was the opposite of my parents' world. No marble floors, no soft lighting, no one pretending this was glamorous. Just fluorescent bulbs, scuffed tile plastic chairs, and a line of people clutching folders like life rafts. A sign above the counter read, "Recording public records." Another, smaller one said, "For fraud concerns, please see supervisor." That was my line. I think a deed was recorded in my name that I never signed. I told the woman at the main window, keeping my voice even. They told me to ask for a supervisor. She glanced at my folder, then hit a button under the counter. "Window 4, please." Window 4 had a hire counter and a nameplate, "Miguel Alvarez, recording supervisor." He was in his 50s, glasses low on his nose, expression worn but not unkind. "What can I do for you?" he asked. I laid my documents out like evidence. The corrective deed printout with my supposed signature, my travel proof, the title company's chain of title summary. "This deed says I came into a notary's office and signed my grandfather's condo back to my parents," I said. On that date, I was in Japan. "The title company has already opened a claim. I believe this deed is fraudulent." He listened without interrupting, then swiveled to his monitor. "What's the instrument number?" he asked. I read it off. He typed it in, pulled up the digital image of the corrective deed, and turned his screen slightly so I could see. The county time stamp glowed in one corner, the notary seal in another. "We received this as an e-recording," he said, clicking another tab. "Submission log shows it came from an authorized user law offices of Cartwright and Hale." "That's a bulk submitter." "Your parents' attorney, I'm guessing." "Yes," I said. "We don't see the signer when it comes in like that," he explained. "Why rely on the notary's acknowledgement and the submitter's certification? If they commit fraud, we need outside proof to void a deed. We can't just decide we don't like how it looks." I nodded. I brought some. From my folder, I took out a printout of the police report I'd filed at the station on my way over. It wasn't dramatic, just a brief incident report for suspected forgery and identity theft with a case number at the top. "I've opened a police report," I said, tapping the number. "And here's my passport stamp for that week. Boarding passes, hotel receipts in Tokyo, even a geo-tagged photo I posted on social media the day this deed says I was here signing." I slid over the stack, each page a small, stubborn piece of reality. He went through them slowly, lips pursed, checking dates against the deed on his screen. The silence stretched, filled with the murmur of other people at other windows, the hiss of the ticket machine spitting out numbers. Finally, he sat back. "All right," he said. "There's no way you were standing in front of that notary on that date if you were halfway across the world." Relief pricked at my eyes, but I forced myself to focus on what came next. "So what can your office actually do?" He folded his hands. "We can't prosecute anyone. That's the district attorney. But we can document that you dispute this deed and treat it as potentially void. Here's how. First, you can file an affidavit of non-execution, swearing under penalty of perjury that you never signed this instrument. We attach that to the document in our system. Second, we can flag this deed as under investigation potential forgery internally, so any future transactions involving this parcel or this deed number will light up. Third, given the supporting evidence and the police report, we can formally notify the DA's Real Estate Fraud Unit and the Secretary of State's Notary Enforcement Division. He turned to his printer, hit a key, and a form began to churn out. He slid it under the glass. This is the affidavit. Read it carefully. It's a legal statement. The form was plain, but the language was serious. I, Hanem, declare that I did not sign or authorize the execution of instrument Pindi Dalzadal, recorded on Haudati, purporting to convey my interest in property description. At the time of purported execution, I was located at Hay location, as evidenced by attached documentation. I filled in each blank, attached copies of my travel proof and the police incident report number, and signed at the bottom. The line above my signature read, I certify under penalty of perjury under the laws of this state that the foregoing is true and correct. The words, penalty of perjury, made my hand steadier, not shakier. If they'd used my name as a weapon, I was reclaiming it under oath. Alvarez stamped the affidavit, date and time in bright ink, then scanned it into his system. I watched my words become part of the same database that had once only held theirs. I'll flag the corrective deed now, he said, fingers moving over the keyboard. Internally, it will show as under investigation, potential forgery. I'll also prepare a referral packet to the district attorney's real estate fraud unit. They can subpoena the notary's journal, your parent's attorney, anyone involved, and will alert the Secretary of State's Notary Division that this commission number is tied to an alleged forgery. That can trigger their own investigation. Weeks later, I sat in a very different conference room, this one in the district attorney's office downtown. The carpeting was newer, the art only slightly less generic, but the air felt heavier. At the table were a DA investigator, Alvarez from the recorder's office, a woman from the title company's legal team I recognized as Ms. Chen, my parents and their designer Best, and their attorney from Cartwright and Hale. My parents looked like they were attending a board meeting, instead of a fraud conference. My mother in a cream blazer, pearls perfectly matched, my father in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They carried themselves like pillars of the community, caught in some unfortunate misunderstanding. The DA investigator, a woman with sharp eyes and a stack of files in front of her, opened a folder. Thank you all for coming, she said. We're here to review concerns about the transfer and sale of Unit 304, Seabreeze condominiums. No one spoke. She began laying out documents one by one on the table's center. My grandfather's original deed to the condo, the grant deed from him to me, the corrective deed from May, back to my parents, the trust transfer, the final sale. Each paper hit the table with a soft thud. Here's the recorded timeline, she said. First, Mr. Harper deeds the property to his granddaughter. Then, months later, a corrective deed appears, executed and notarized, moving it back to his son and daughter-in-law. Shortly after, they transfer it into their family trust and sell it. She slid out another sheet. Here are the travel records Ms. Harper provided, passport stamps, airline itineraries, hotel receipts, social media posts, all placing her in Tokyo on the date the corrective deed was purportedly signed in front of a notary in this county. She tapped a final document and looked at my parents' attorney. And this is the notary journal entry for that date, obtained via subpoena from the Secretary of State's office. It records a visit from my full name for a grant deed with a thumbprint and an ID number that belonged to her. However, the ID number references a driver's license that was reported renewed in person a month later on a different coast. And the thumbprint does not match the biometric data from Ms. Harper's DMV file. My mother's face had gone very still. My father's jaw clenched. Their lawyer cleared his throat. There appears to have been a clerical error, he said smoothly. My clients relied on their attorney and the notary. Ms. Harper orally agreed to allow her parents to manage the condo. It's entirely plausible she signed at another time and the notary misentered the date. The investigator cut him off with a raised hand. We've heard that theory. It doesn't explain why the journal shows a thumbprint that isn't hers, or why the entry was consecutively logged between two other clients who have already confirmed their appointments occurred on that exact day. Miss Chen from the title company spoke up. Our position is that we issued a policy based on what appeared to be a valid chain of title. Based on new information, we're treating the sale as a potential claim arising from a prior forgery. We will be pursuing recovery from the notary's errors and omissions insurance. Depending on the outcome of your investigation, we may also seek recovery from the sellers who warranted that they held clear, marketable title. The DA investigator folded her hands. Given the evidence submitted, the travel documentation, the discrepancy between the notary's journal and Ms. Harper's actual location, the recorder's affidavit of non-execution, and the pattern of benefit flowing to the parents, we are opening a formal investigation into potential forgery, filing of a false instrument, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. She let that sink in before continuing. If charges are filed and sustained, there could be criminal penalties. Additionally, you may face civil liability for damages equal to the value of the property interest that was taken and potential claims from the subsequent buyer if the title to the condo is clouded. For the first time, my parents' composure visibly cracked. My mother's hand tightened on the strap of her handbag until her knuckles blanched. My father's certainty drained from his face, replaced by something like calculation edged with fear. The investigator went on. There is, however, the possibility of a restitution agreement if you cooperate. That could include paying your daughter the full net proceeds you received from the sale plus penalties in exchange for consideration in charging and sentencing recommendations. That's a conversation for you and your counsel. They both turned to look at me then, as if I held the power to make this all go away with a word. Once, that look would have made me fold, would have dragged me back into their script of family first and don't make a scene. This time, I met their eyes and felt something else rise instead. Grief for the family I'd thought I had, and a fierce, unfamiliar sense of self-respect. Grandpa wanted me to have a place to stand that was mine. I said, voice steady. You decided your image and money mattered more than his last decision and my rights. I'm not dropping this. No one answered. The only sound was the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights and the scratch of the investigator's pen as she wrote something down. When the meeting broke up, my parents and their lawyer huddled in low, urgent whispers. I didn't wait for them. Mr. Alvarez handed me copies of 2 documents, the recorder's fraud flag notation and the DA's formal referral memo with a case number at the top. I walked out of the building into the thin afternoon sunlight, those papers in my hand. Paper proof that, for once, the system didn't just see my parents' version of the story. It saw mine, and that changed everything about what I did next. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I can drive down to the coast and let myself into Unit 304 like nothing ever happened. Instead, I sit on my thrift store couch in my small apartment and scroll through old photos on my phone. There's the faded couch in Grandpa's living room, sagging in the middle but always smelling faintly of coffee and sunscreen. His chipped mug on the tiny kitchen counter. The peeling blue balcony railing, the view of the waves that never looked quite as dramatic as real life. The physical place belongs to a stranger now. I accept that I may never lean on that railing again, never hear the old sliding door stick and jerk open. But somewhere in a government building, in a file cabinet, or on a server, there's a case number with my name next to the word victim, not ungrateful child. Somewhere in the recorder's index, there's an affidavit where I swore I did not sign away what was mine, and the system believed me. After the DA meeting, I started treating my life the way they'd treated my grandfather's condo, as something that needed protecting on paper. I requested credit freezes and fraud alerts with all 3 major bureaus, sat on hold through the automated menus until each one confirmed the flags were active. I ran my name through every public property database I could access, checking county by county to make sure there weren't any other corrective surprises hiding in plain sight. At work and with my bank, I updated my emergency contacts, deleting my parents' numbers and replacing them with a friend who had sat with me through the worst of this. I made an appointment with an estate attorney and, for the first time, drafted my own will and power of attorney. I wrote down exactly who I trusted to make decisions for me and who I explicitly did not. No more blank spaces for someone else to fill in later. I've gone low contact with my parents. We exchange emails only, and only about logistics, the DA's restitution talks, payment schedules, document deadlines. No more Sunday dinners at their house. No more polite lies about how blessed we are as a family. The hurt is real and it runs deep, but so does the relief of knowing they can't quietly sign my name to anything now without expecting subpoenas and pushback to follow. Months after that conference room meeting, a plain envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a letter from the Secretary of State. The notary's commission officially revoked, their name added to a disciplinary list. A separate notice from the DA's office confirmed that my parents had signed a restitution agreement. They would pay me the net proceeds from the condo sale over time, under court supervision, with consequences if they missed a payment. It doesn't give me Grandpa's balcony back, but it does something he always wanted. It gives me a financial foothold that's legally, undeniably mine. My grandfather thought putting my name on a deed would protect me. It didn't stop my parents from trying, but it left a trail that finally told the truth, in ink they couldn't erase. If someone in your family has ever tried to manage your inheritance, your name, or your property for you, remember you are not overreacting by asking to see the paperwork. If you like these justice stories, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments which country are you watching from, and have you ever had to fight back when family or a boss tried to use a system or document against you?